Thanks for tuning in to Season 4 of Strange, Rare, and Peculiar Homeopathy Podcast, where homeopathy lives, breathes, and evolves with Denise Straiges and Alastair Gray. We'll be exploring modern practice, research, and philosophy, from Hahnemann's radical insights to today's breakthroughs and discoveries. Get ready for homeopathy woes, feedback from pros, and the more you knows.
Good morning if you're in the east. Good evening if you're in the west. G'day
Hello?
if you're in the north.
But you're saying good morning based on location as opposed to when they're listening to this, which...
Well, how am I supposed to know when they're listening to this?
Well,
Good morrow, I could
Yeah.
be saying.
there you go. How about that? I was still getting situated. You started without me.
Sometimes you got to be sharp to keep up with me.
So I'll say, welcome to the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast. I am Denise Straiges, and I'm here with Alastair Gray.
And I am the academic director at AHE, plus the research director at the Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy / Home Foundation. And what do you do?
I am the president and clinical director of the Academy of Homeopathy Education, and I do other stuff too. I work in the research office and all the things.
She
And
does all the things.
I kicked this off years ago. Wow, good. So we now have a proper introduction. We did it. And so we don't forget, like and subscribe. What we found out is that we are now ranking in homeopathy podcasts.
We're big in Japan.
No, I don't think so.
I always like that statement, when a band knows they're doing okay because they may not have hit the charts in the UK top 100 or something, but they're big in Japan.
I think look, if you're watching this, you see it's like I just opened a cauldron. We're trying to solve for the tea disparities now.
Yeah.
We are not in the same room. And so I now have a thermos of tea, my clean canteen, that I realized not that long ago was not that clean because the rubber gasket, it was disgusting. I put it in vinegar and I cleaned it.
Filthy.
It's just for leaving it in the car. Okay. So here we are though. And so we're working on having a proper format, not in response to the guy who said, can you please just get to the point?
No, go to school. That's our response to you.
Go to school, come to the lectures, because we actually do have the capacity to do this stuff in a very appropriate format. But this is our podcast. This is a little service to the community, us sitting around chatting. We did stop eating toast, and you've stopped slurping.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. It's just that every now and again I am conscious as I am trying to breathe through my nose and swallow and chew gum and all of those things that you do, multitasking things that you do, that sometimes that's offensive to some people. And sometimes you just go, whatever. And other times you go, no, I'm going to do my best to not be offensive.
So our plan for today is we actually have a couple of listener questions to answer, one of which has to do with, I'm going to paraphrase, sort of polypharmacy in an emergency. Which is great. And then we have sort of a confession to make and a little marriage counseling to do. So the confession part is that, well, it's not totally a confession, but last week we recorded, those of you who look forward to an episode and you're like, well, where were they last week? We recorded, but we're in our new space. Well, I'm in my new space. Alastair's not in his new space because
the door fell off.
And so we have a little bit of a problem. So he's now in the library.
I mean, and what I'm learning is that while the job gets done using a chainsaw for fine carpentry, it's not always the best choice for every job.
It's really not. And I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the miter box.
Oh, no, I can't go there. No, one too many things at this time of the year. It's really interesting. When you said that, I went to overwhelm, la, too much going on. Can't learn a new skill. Have to learn, because I've got to be on YouTube for at least 16 hours a day, learning about the new pump and how that works in the kiddie pool. I've got to fix up the aphids, which are likely to arrive on the roses. So I've got to do some research there. Plus curry making,
That's the marriage counseling that's coming up. But also I have their carpenter ants in my studio, my pottery studio, which is really a problem. So we
Did you see I got the stuff?
I did. We're resorting to poison. We've tried all the nice things. I've had my studio there for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about it. I've been a potter since 1989. And I had a wheel for many, many years of my own. But like I never had like a proper studio and my own kiln, which is just, I'll tell you, I'm living large.
It
Anyway,
makes you completely potty.
I'm potty all right. But the marriage counseling, before we get into all the homeopathy, we got to run this by everybody. So, but
Are you sure?
I'd love feedback on this. So I cook 99% of the meals. And I
like 99.95 to be
So-
precise.
yeah. And I'd like to cook. I enjoy it. It's my relaxation. And I feel like I make a decent meal.
But there's also a reason for that. And it was because very early on in our relationship, I made the extremely smart, strategic decision to offer to make something and completely made a mess of the kitchen such that
I can't. Like, I just can't deal with the chaos that ensues when Alastair cooks. Anyway, so one of the things that I feel bad about is that a natural go-to for me in my repertoire is not, I don't say like once a week, I think I'm going to make a curry tonight. And I feel like for people who grew up in certain parts of the world or in certain cultures, like making a curry is a thing. I never had a curry until I was in college because it just
it never came up.
it never came up. I grew up in an Italian family. And so anyway, and so last night we decided, and we do, we make a curry, and I have a couple of curries in my repertoire. But so last night Al had a client late and I prepped everything for a massaman curry. So I got all the vegetables prepped, everything. And I even taught Al another technique to add to the making of his curry, which was browning the aromatics first. Anyway, so then he comes in after I have everything. It's all prepped so that there's not going to be a giant kitchen disaster. And so he then stands at the stove for 15 minutes, puts together the ingredients. And then what did you say at the end?
Something innocuous.
Like,
By God, this is good. This is the best meal I've had in a month. Now, to me, that's just like in the moment. I'm in the moment and I'm just talking about how enjoyable this is. For Denise, however, ay.
wait, what?
What?
Oh my gosh. I couldn't even believe it. Was so funny. Because
The cussing and the hollering.
on one hand, I did feel badly because I feel like you could do with more curry in your life. And so, so I kind of take it as that, but like, given that I make like all the food,
So
I like all the things from scratch, and you're like, this is the best meal I've had in a month. Anyway.
So the question actually is, viewers, especially male-bodied viewers. Now, not to generalize, because this is not necessarily about gender, but I would like to know, is there a better way, or is there something I could have done differently in that moment where I'm thinking to myself, my God, this is good?
Oh my gosh. All right.
And is it a normal interpretation for, by God, this is the best meal in a month, to interpret that as all previous meals have been shithouse, which they haven't been. And that's the point. It's that, my God, I live like an absolute king, a culinary king. Not that I am a culinary king, but I eat like one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to the homeopathy.
While we're on the culinary theme, though, can we just go, because last week we had a bit of a debacle.
Let's get there after. We'll get to it because
we'll get to the pigeons.
Oh yeah, okay. But we've got a couple of announcements, and also we've got a couple of comments and some interesting things. I'm really excited about the layout for today, and I'm also really sorry that last week didn't work out. So we're trying to revive some of the topics we talked about last week. Okay, so a couple of announcements. We have an open house on May 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern, and you can register at ahe.online/events, or just go to the AHE website, ahe.online will take you there. Also, I'm excited because we developed a program for palliative and end-of-life care. It's like homeopathy hospice. And I just spent so much time in developing the course. And then, of course, our team has spent so much time on working on developing this incredible program. And we're teaching it again, July 22nd and 29th from 10 to 2 Eastern time. We tried to make the time frame so that our friends in the UK and Europe who have asked about it will be able to attend. You can find out more about that at ahe.online. And then we're going to do another thing now, testimonial of the week from our...
Hang on just a moment. While we're doing advertising, Alastair Charles Gray will do his third free lecture on the history of healing and medicine on the 21st of May, 7 p.m.
Right.
And the fourth on the 28th of May. And that is a change of schedule. Or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, a change of schedule from what was previously advertised.
Good. Okay. I like the misplaced H because I like how Italians do it. Like an Italian will say hamburger for hamburger. We'll say, right? They leave off the H, but then they add an H. Let me think of an example where the
Well, what's lavender and rosemary?
herbs, but that's not
Okay, you don't say herbs.
herbs. I mean but that's an Americanization. I have to think of, but like the Italian, they use the H, when they want to. Anyway, okay, so now we have our helpline. So we have a clinical service, part of our not-for-profit. We are a 501c3, and our number one mission of the four things is the provision of accessible, high quality, and accessible, meaning inexpensive homeopathy care, and sometimes free. We raise money for care grants. And so Homeopathy Help Now.
Oh, no, you can't do that because that's exactly in reverse what happened with the Musman curry. Because by saying that of the four things that we do, by saying that the number one priority, I can't believe I've just got you. So that means great and robust and never-ending research outputs are number two, or are you saying they're 3 or 4?
Well, the first thing on because I did file the articles of incorporation. I didn't see you doing that, and it is
the articles of what?
Articles of incorporation when we filed for our 501c3.
I know what the articles of war are, but not the articles of incorporation.
We're going to be at the articles of war in a minute, buddy. Anyway, so so it's great care, and we have outcomes-based research with it, and we get testimonials. We love when people tell us how they do. So someone wrote in, quote, Danielle's work has helped me to put the hardest season of my life behind me. Struggling greatly with PPD/PPA, but after working with Danielle for some months now, my mental and physical health has improved immensely. I'm very grateful, and my husband and children are happy to see me happy. That is just so beautiful.
Danielle D?
I'm sure it is. She's...
Wow.
Yep. So
nice work.
So people are getting really, really good care at Homeopathy Help Now. We have acute, chronic, complex, and palliative life care. So anyway, all right. Like, follow, subscribe to Strange Rare Peculiar on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen, and send your questions to marketing@ahe.online. Sounds so professional. I have the whole thing in front of me over here.
While Denise is taking a breath, what do you think about her outfit today? Because we not only have the Sophie scarf.
No, this is not. This is just a scarf.
Well, it's a scarf, but it's a little one tied around the top. So that's a Sophie scarf, right?
No. It's just a small scarf. A Sophie scarf is relative to a particular knitting pattern.
Well, imagine that it's knitted. Isn't it gorgeous? And then the second thing is, just below that, in a somewhat verdant spring green, is the vest, what she knitted.
I did indeed.
In New Zealand over the winter.
Yes, I did. Thank you for noticing that I'm wearing a knitted garment made by my own hand. Here's a great question. You ready? The question is from a podcast listener. She said, thank you. Here's my question. I am a second-year homeopathy student in a 4-year classical homeopathy school where they chop off your hand if you give more than one remedy at a time.
Excellent strategy. Love that strategy.
We haven't thought of that one.
No. It's right up there, because what I was saying to students earlier in the week was that it goes back to the days where trading in saffron was accompanied with a legal directive that if you added anything to the saffron, if you were selling it and passing it on, it was so valuable that the person that was caught cutting or adding to the saffron had their hand cut off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Saffron. What about that?
It's expensive, saffron.
I know. Yeah. And it is now, but it certainly was then.
And, we have not really done this sort of amputation process in homeopathy school.
I like it, though, because I think if people ask a silly question, then they should maybe lose a tooth. If they suggested that they would prescribe medicine from the psychotic miasm instead of the syphilitic miasmatic, disease was
oh, wait, even better, they're going to use a nozo to clear the miasm. Then we chop off the whole thing.
the
Anyway,
whole the whole thing.
I don't know. Okay, so anyway,
Off with the head.
she is also an emergency veterinarian since 1995 and a professor. I like you already. I've been in love with homeopathy since 1988 when my classical homeopath gave me the remedy that set me on the path to veterinary medicine. My question is, would you ever go to the dark side and give more than one remedy at a time in this type of instance?
Oh,
I work with extremely traumatized rescue dogs and often have access to them for only 24 hours while they are being shipped to some other rescue/non-kill shelter. I would like to give them several remedies, e.g. aconitum, ignatia, staphysagria, and natmur, and wondered what you think of this approach in this type of situation only. Thank you for your fabulous podcast. I look forward to every episode. Kind regards. I love that. I'm not going to, but I love that question. And I appreciate so many things about this. Number one is the recognition that there are times to go off script and there are times not to. The recognition that sometimes you got to deal with what you have in front of you and you only have a couple of minutes and you got to make a call. What are you going to do? So I am with Maureen. In that situation, I would probably give more than one remedy. I might change out the list though.
yeah. What was the list again?
Is aconite, ignatia, staphysagria, and natmur.
Yeah, I mean, gee whizzingums. Good, but keep going. I see you.
I'm going to give an example that we've talked about on this podcast before. Back in 2021, maybe 2020, I stepped on a ground bee nest and I got stung all up my leg, all up my side, and a few on the other side, and they were in my hair. And I got stung probably 200 times. And I was going into shock. And what did you do? Oh.
Well, I tried to catch you as you went running around the yard.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
I was screaming and running.
What I did is I ran inside. I grabbed aconite, apis,
Vespa,
and probably ledum.
yeah.
And then I tried to find you, and you were, I think that going into shock was more about the hysteria rather than.
No. Because remember, I was starting to swell up and you put me in the shower. Do you remember this? Because they were in my hair and I was still getting bitten, and you dragged me upstairs and you got me in the shower.
Well, because they were in your clothes. So
they were in my clothes.
I had to act. I mean, talk about getting intimate with your clients and the therapeutic relationship. But I removed her clothing and put her in the shower.
Yeah.
And then, you're totally right. I think it would have gone, if I was probably coherent myself, it would have been probably aconite first, apis next, ledum third, and whatever else. Yeah.
Well, you put a bunch of them in water. And then you had me sipping on a glass of water while I was in the shower, which is distinctly different than having a glass of champagne in the shower, which is always great. It doesn't happen often, but when it does.
Oh.
But yeah, it was. And then when things calmed down and we could see what was going on, you reassessed the situation.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So you've thrown that back at me. Well, not thrown it, but you're saying that it was me doing the prescribing. I thought you were going to claim that one for your own sim. But no, that's a legit situation where in the cold light of frontline, acute, dramatic homeopathy, you got to do something. And what you do is compromise on that principle. Unlike the NCH, or our good friends at the NCH, that have compromised on that principle for chronic homeopathy, and it no longer exists as a principle.
Well, for any homeopathy, they took out, what Al's saying is that in the definition of homeopathy that is now found in Homeopathy Today magazine that goes out to the general public, the 4 established principles of homeopathy give one remedy at a time for the largest totality of symptoms that can be understood, or the meaningful totality, prescribed according to the law of similars and given in the minimum dose to begin the healing process. They left out single remedy. They just took it out. So now it's 3 principles of homeopathy because they can appeal to the polypharmacy people.
Worst decision ever. Anywho, back to Maureen. Maureen, I reckon that going back to your situation, that is really dramatic. See, it's obviously not an acute situation either. It's a chronic situation for the animal. And therefore, you're looking and going, geez, what do I do? Where do I begin? You know, you've got a complex,
Wait,
dramatic.
really? I saw it totally differently.
What?
No, because what I'm hearing is these dogs are being transported. So
Yeah.
these dogs are already in a trauma state. Now they're being transported from one place to another, and it's going to be a total exacerbation of trauma. I'm with Maureen on this.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Just you got a cat behind you. So in that situation, I might be looking for purely practical reasons. How can I contribute to the future well-being of this animal in a really tough spot? I think, you know, thinking about that remedy and some of the others, I might not be doing the Staphylococcus aureus unless I'd taken the case and got indignation.
But
And if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be.
but I see I might.
Yeah.
You know why?
Why?
Because they're going to have a reproductive surgery. They're going to get neutered. And so depending on when that is happening, let's say that they are getting neutered and then transported to another shelter, then maybe Staphylococcus aureus, you know, because they wouldn't have had time to heal and they're like all disrupted. I wouldn't throw that one out. I wonder where the Napier. I don't get the Napier part.
That part's guesswork. That
Yeah.
might be expert opinion guesswork.
People with knowledge of veterinary homeopathy, I have such respect for the level
Oh,
of detail that they
wow.
understand. So I would say just I can't see that from my limited understanding of the problem and veterinary homeopathy. But I would definitely be fine to give aconite.
But on the other hand, let's now just push it a little in the other direction. Is that not the thin end of the wedge? Is there not the opportunity to, in all cases, identify what's predominant, what can I do now, hold on to your principles, and prescribe the best similar that you can see? And it could well still be aconite, but it may well be another trauma remedy. It could be opium, or it could be something like that, you know? In which
Yeah.
case, why are you compromising on the single remedy?
Because I think what she's saying is she's got one shot. She's got a lot of animals she's dealing with. And if she came up with some concoction that might be helpful, that can be done as there's a big transport of animals, how about we compromise on this and say, in the absence of the capacity for individualized symptom assessment, then a combo that could be useful for the transport of animals who are already in a highly traumatized state could be helpful. I mean, look what happened. So our dog, Ziggs McGigglepuffs, Ziggy, she came from a no-kill shelter.
Yes.
She'd been transported. She was a trauma dog, and she's a combo of like Australian Shepherd or cattle dog, maybe some Catahoula because she's got the marble eye. She looks to have a little bit of a what do you call it? Like not a retriever, but
Oh, she does the pointing thing sometimes.
a pointer. She does the pointing thing. And one of the things with these dogs is that they can be reactive. They're really protective. So like, I wonder if she had, and we've had her now, it'll be 8 years. So she's about 10 years old and she's still got some trauma within her. And we've dealt with most of it, but like, I often will think that what if she had care without all the trauma at the shelter?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm with Maureen on this one.
I just wonder how we can actually turn it into something which has got boundaries around it, because it's the Banerjee situation, isn't it? We're in a situation in Calcutta. We've got a conga line. We've got 500 people that are in our waiting room. We've got 10 seconds with the physician, and we can provide, some triage in front of the physician. And then, so we've got a situation, we know from our 100 years of experience that statistically these remedies do best in this situation. Okay, let's give either this protocol or this combination or whatever it is. But of course, the disclaimer is, well, if this doesn't work within 48 hours, get individualized homeopathy. Now, that's the one thing that Maureen can't do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to add to what you just said. So for people who are watching video, this is Hildegard of Bingen. This is one of our cats. Came to sit on my lap. Anyway, so so the Banerjees. So if you're not familiar with the Banerjees, you might have heard about like practical homeopathy and protocols. It's been trademarked by a couple of people who have monetized this idea of polypharmacy based on claims that this is what the Banerjees do. And even if the protocols are the same, the Banerjees are coming at it from this totally different and really amazing perspective. So they're a not-for-profit institution. They are medical doctors who are in densely populated, parts of India where access to medical care is just not there. And so they've started this, this initiative. It's been 4 generations now.
Oh,
3?
going back to the first decade of the 20th century.
Yeah. So at least 4 generations. And what they do is, as Al said, they sort of recognize certain instances and they have protocols for it. But what they're doing is, what they're looking at is what we would call a contracted totality prescription. In other words, they have been able to assess the case and to say that we're going to look at this case through just the lens of the pathology. And we know that one of these remedies has been indicated in enough instances that we can, with some degree of confidence that we're not causing harm, give this combination of remedies. And if after the assessed amount of time they haven't progressed, there will be potentially a second protocol given. And if that doesn't do the job, then the person is seen by a full-on classically trained homeopath who can look at the case through a much larger totality. That's the premise of those protocols. And what we've learned, because the Banerjee family, they've been coming out now giving a cease and desist to the people who have monetized their operation in the United States. And they talk about these protocols as being living, breathing organisms. In other words, they're constantly reassessing and reevaluating the efficacy and the appropriateness of their work. I just have great respect for what they are doing when it's in that circumstance. So I love, Al, that you brought that out, because it's like, this is just what Maureen is talking about.
It is. It's exactly the same, isn't it?
Right? In the absence of time and access to the client, be it a trauma animal or, a person who doesn't have access to care, is this going to be the best way to proceed? It very well might be. And again, because of our limited knowledge of veterinary homeopathy, there might be reasons why they're giving those remedies, but definitely aconite. I could totally see Ignatia. And then I wonder if maybe like they could create a couple of different protocols, like an animal who's clearly showing like a reactive tendency. Maybe there's a remedy. I don't know if it would be, I don't want to make a recommendation here, but something that deals with sort of the anger and expression, or if they're getting a whole truckload of vaccinations because this is what's done at that time, is there something that addresses that? Like maybe that is the way to go. You got one shot at it. I would imagine when the situation is so acute, the likelihood of doing harm from overprescribing is much less than inappropriate prescribing for someone in a chronic situation.
Totally agree. Yeah. Good job.
I love that, Maureen. And I have to say, I'm sure my guess is that she and like the veterinary homeopaths are just amazing. And we have a veterinary homeopath who's going through our program now, who teaches veterinary homeopathy and who works with another homeopath who we know and are really, as we're getting to know, are really quite fond of. So if you're interested in more information about people who I feel are right on with it, like if you were hoping to develop some sort of intervention here, we can suggest 2 really good people.
One of the things about veterinary homeopathy is that you've got to have an understanding of the anatomy and physiology, and especially the pathophysiology of the large and small animals, the domestic and the farm animals. And then I think from that, see, every now and again we get a lucky shot. We get a lucky hit with our animals. You and I gave Dulcamara to one of our cats. Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, this is a really great story.
Oh, the vets were actually here, weren't they?
Yeah. So we were about to go away. We were going to the AIH, the first AIH conference at UConn Medical.
Okay.
It could have been 3 years ago.
Yep.
And so it was early October. And this cat who's on my lap right now, Hildegard of Bingen, she had been outside when the weather turned really cold. But we hadn't connected that detail yet. Anyway, she was sick. We were getting ready to leave, and we were going to have a house sitter, and we're about to leave, and the cat is exhibiting signs of sickness. She was hiding in the bathroom or under a table, and she wasn't eating. And this is a cat who doesn't miss a meal. Look at the size of her.
Oh my gosh, he's enormous.
It's enormous, right? And clearly sick. And so we called the mobile vet. And so, because we have 3 cats, and like when we've had to have actual care for them, we've got this service that comes to the house. Okay. So they came, and she's really sick, and we were nervous. And I don't think we had prescribed for her. I don't know why.
No, it was in the conversation that we both looked at each other and went, "Oh, it's Dulcamara."
Dulcamara,
And we
because
were
she's been
describing
out
the
the
symptoms.
whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there holding the cat while the vet is examining. I said, I'll go get the Dulcamara out of the pharmacy, out of our home pharmacy. He brings it, and I'm giving it to the cat. And now the vet's having a fit. She's like, you can't do that. I'm like, yeah, it's in my house. It's my cat. How am I going to do it? And we gave her the Dulcamara, and she got up and she walked away. Like, she had not been moving. She gets up, she walks away.
Yeah, it was good.
She went outside, then she came back in. She ate a big meal, went back outside. She was fine.
Yep.
We've had 2 goats in clinic.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a goat called Tiffany, who, what was wrong with her? That was years ago.
The birth of Tiffany? Is that what it was? She was the one that came in and pooped in the house.
Yeah. Anyway, so I love the veterinary homeopathy questions. Okay. Now we've got a question that we talked about last week, which is a person who wrote in and said, why doesn't homeopathy work for me? Or I've seen multiple practitioners and it hasn't worked for me.
So it's an interesting question, because sometimes we've got the, why is this remedy not worked for me? But the question, I think, is why is homeopathy not worked for me? Right?
Yeah.
That's a
And
good question, isn't it? So let me have a crack at it, because I've always enjoyed having those conversations with especially experienced homeopaths.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today at ahe.online.
I remember having it with Rajan Sankaran once in India, and I asked him, I was interviewing him for a book, and then I stayed on and spent some time in his clinic. And one of the things that I was kind of intrigued about was watching his prescribing style, which of course is extremely classical, not extremely sensation based. But I was really intrigued about how he was doing and his feeling on how he was doing, his success, or,
Right.
self-perceived success. And he said, about 5%. And for those magnificent, one remedy wonder prescriptions. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, nice, because I reckon that's about the same with me. And then it was, of course, the other question, what about those situations when nothing happens? And it's the bell-shaped curve that we experience as practitioners, whereby a proportion of our clients do magnificently well. Another proportion do really, really well with a couple of remedies over time. There's the other part of the bell-shaped curve, I think, where a number of people improve in their symptoms, but they're getting other types of healing and other modalities weighing on in. And then there's probably another group down here. And then there's the group when nothing happens. And I think it's a bit of a bell-shaped curve with hopefully a little bit of more plumpness at the more action at this end of it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. And I really like the word plump.
Thank you. It is a good word.
It is.
Not to be misused, however, because it can go horribly wrong. But I wonder about the 5%, maybe the 5 or 3%, or why did nothing happen? Now, for me, for something to happen in homeopathy, you've got to have a good listener, a good practitioner, and you've got to have a correct or a close remedy, and then you've got to have a person that's giving you information. The sick person, the practitioner, and the remedy. Those 3 things have got to be there. And there's got to be a flow of information or communication between them. And so if you've got good information, you've got a good listener, but a wildly inaccurate remedy, then nothing's going to happen. If you've got a client that's giving good information, but it's being misinterpreted through a poor filter or a poor listening on behalf of the practitioner, you're never going to get a good hit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think, though, because you and I have actually talked about this. We've been talking about this since this question came in. And I have a couple of other thoughts as well. Because, first of all, there's a phenomenon that happens in homeopathy where inevitably a person comes for their follow up and they tell you nothing has happened. Nothing happened. And so, one of the things that we talk a lot about, because the whole thing with homeopathy, it's about case management. It's an ongoing process of evaluation of the action of the remedy, and then the next prescription being based on what has happened since the administration of the first remedy or from the initial prescription. This idea of the second prescription being the one after the first remedy has acted. And so, of course, the remedy has to act. And that is where I think the listener question is coming in. Now, I'm kind of taking it to a second place, which is like we need to evaluate if something has happened. And just someone saying nothing has happened isn't always true, because sometimes people integrate the healing that they've gotten. In other words, when a person comes for a follow-up, like, for example, last week, one of the things we talked about on the podcast that the sound was bad and we have to re-record is that the night before I had seen a case of a kid who I've worked with her whole life. And when she's under stress, she gets skin issues. And she's at puberty and she has been good for years. In fact, all of her stuff was good until COVID. Then she had a little bit of a blip, and now she's going through puberty. She's having another blip. And I think some deep things were coming up. I hadn't seen her in a couple of years because she had been pretty healthy. Now she comes back, and mom was concerned that there might be some eating issues going on, and there were some skin issues that had recurred and so forth. So I had seen her for the first time in a long time, and then we were corresponding by email, and she's like, nothing has happened. And I write back and I said, Kate, just trying to elicit a little bit more information to see if I could do anything before I met with her. No changes. So then I meet with her and I go through and I ask her a series of questions about all the things we talked about. Turns out that her skin was 90% better. She had one patch remaining.
Mm-hmm.
She was eating regularly, didn't have any sort of conversation in her head about modulating her eating. Her mom was also quite happy with the way that was going. She's sleeping well. Her mood is good. She's regulated. She was great. Literally the only symptom was that she still had a little bit of eczema left.
Yeah.
But had I not gone through with her, she was like, no, everything is the same. Well, I think sometimes for us, everything seems to be the same because we're living in our body and we're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's possible. I don't mean to say that to discount what the listener who wrote in and said she hasn't had good response, but there are a couple of things that I've encountered. One is, that thing where people talk about if you have 50 homeopaths in a room, you're going to get 50 different remedy choices.
I never bought that one.
Me neither. Because people that understand homeopathy, I think that there could be 3 or 4 options, but you've got rationale for each option. It would be, I'm looking at a constricted totality, therefore. I'm looking at this and I can see miasmatically a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Which way should I go? Or I have an idea based on the simple language of the case, and this is a remedy that's perhaps lesser known. And even though I don't know a lot about the physical symptomology, I might go with this because the simple language is so bang on. So that might be 4 different approaches. But if people understand the totality of symptoms that need to be cured, there shouldn't be a lot of play.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right? Because there's homeopathy, it's a thing. So I wonder sometimes if people are being treated in this like uber Kantian idea that's based so much on a psychospiritual interpretation of what's happening that is not accounting for the person's physical expression of their symptoms. We just had a conversation with somebody recently about this, a dear friend and colleague who has a physical complaint that the homeopath is wanting to address on a very emotional level. And it's like, no, it needs to be addressed from truly what's happening in the body. So I wonder sometimes if the challenge that we face in homeopathy is that people have resorted to some very cheap and cheerful, is that how we should look at it? Cheap and cheerful ways of prescribing.
Well, you're talking about, you said it, the overly psychospiritual direction. Yep, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
no possibility, of course.
What's that?
And that is that there is a obstacle.
A obstacle to cure.
Yeah, a obstacle to cure or poor
Yeah.
regimen. And so, again, we don't know the context. That's why you need a consultation. But, Hahnemann is the first person to say in the treatment of a chronic disease, you've got to prescribe the remedy, but as early as humanly possible, even before the remedy. Remove the obstacles and institute good lifestyle and regimen. And, he goes on to describe what that is.
Yeah, there's a case that I teach that
sorry, you go and then I'll come back to you.
No, go ahead. You finish your thought.
Well, it's the thought. See, I've had a couple of instances where I catch myself deluding myself about some clients. One of them is I've got 2 clients at the moment, one of whom I've been treating for about 20 years. I first saw her in Australia, but then she moved and is over in Europe, living in Europe now. And when she recontacted me and we started this second phase of our treatment, I just assumed a whole lot of things. Turns out that she's drinking, the presenting complaint is digestive upsets and insomnia. And I didn't even ask about her coffee intake, right?
Yeah.
And then recently, I'm talking to this client who's telling me that he's drinking 28 ounces of coffee. Now, let me just make sure I got that right. Is 28 ounces, is that a 4-ounce cup?
No, that's probably 8.
So 8. So how much is in your thermos?
This is I think this is around 24, 28 ounces.
Oh, really? And so for me, I stopped myself at that point and went, okay, I'm unfamiliar with the whole ounce thing. But let me just determine, is that getting in the way of...
Well, let's look at you as a person who was drinking so much coffee, you were like bleeding out of your eyes. Maybe not so fun to be around. I was like, you gotta cut back on the espresso, mate. And that was a big help.
Yeah.
You have nothing to say about that.
Well,
what's the date of your last shot of espresso?
19th of December, 2019. But hang on, for context, yeah, you're right. But I did get into this habit of very much enjoying the way the Australians make and do their coffee. And it's at least 2 to 3 shots and perhaps twice to 3 times a day, sometimes 10 or 12 shots of coffee. And especially in my 40s, I suppose, you don't want to be engaging in that kind of activity too often. So, and
Well,
then
we've gotten to the point though where we in our school in New York, in our school space in Brooklyn. So Al bought a camping stove, a propane driven camping stove, so that he could make espresso shots in the classroom, and the whole place reeked of propane.
yeah, but hang on, that's because the coffee in Dumbo at the time was appalling, and
And
like
expensive.
dirty brown water. I needed some
Yeah.
appropriate fuel.
So obstacles to cure could be reasons why people don't get a response. I have a case that I teach in semester 4 during our long-term case management and autoimmune block of a woman whose case she was doing well, but like when you're in homeopathy for a long time, you get a sense of an anticipated response, and it's based on a whole bunch of different factors like your confidence in the prescription, the obstacles to cure, the depth of the pathology, the length of time that they've been sick, like all these things kind of, the clarity with which you can see the case. And so with this woman, she was like drinking Diet Coke and rum every night, get like all kinds of like nasty chemical stuff in her house, like,
The
Febreze.
Diet Coke, not the rum.
Yeah, the Febreze plug-in she had in her house.
Ooh.
Even if, I call that a migraine, like in a can. Anyway, when she changed her diet, everything was better. The homeopathy could get more traction because, like, there's a way in which you either do or don't have leeway with a remedy. So
This is really, really important because I misunderstood this when I was beginning to study homeopathy, and I read and heard you can't have coffee and you can't have toothpaste and you can never have a peppermint ever again. And of course, it's
Right.
reading of Aphorism 260 and the footnote. because
Yeah.
the footnote says
For
in the
chronic
treatment of
disease.
chronic disease, it is best to remove yourself from these so that the remedy's got something to push against, so that your vital force can push against the impression made on it by the remedy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So avoiding all those things comes into play. So obstacles cure can definitely be an impediment. So I like to imagine that you've got a bullseye kind of target. And if the remedy is just on the target, right, you're going to get some response. And the likelihood of it being knocked off is relative to its proximity to the center of the target. If you get to the center, drink your coffee, whatever, like that remedy, it's going to really take you where you need to go. And the same goes with approving. If you're super susceptible to approving, you're not going to drink a cup of coffee and knock that thing out. You got to figure out a better way to get rid of it. So if you're on the periphery, though, if the remedy is, as Jeremy Sher calls a close enough-a-come, that remedy may or may not get just knocked out easily. So obstacles to cure become more of an issue there.
Right. In other words, the closer you get, the less obstacles become an obstacle. Is that what you're saying?
Say again?
The closer you get to the center of the target, the less the obstacles in life become a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to deal with them, right? There's no free lunch, but yeah.
No, I
No.
agree with you.
There's another thing. A listener wrote in and said, okay, so this person is talking about an obstacle that could be a person that has had an adverse event to a medication. And every now and again, you give an isopathic intervention, a tautopathic intervention, and you can make a difference. This person says, why limit yourself with a bunch of question marks? These remedies are magic in multiple styles of application. I have someone who cannot tolerate prednisone on a radionics prednisolinum 21C daily, and it has been life-changing for him. Is it allopathic in approach? Yep. But the other remedies didn't act. There were 0 side effects, and he has his life back. Win-win. Okay. I mean, I'm always there. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yeah,
So
that's interesting because it's like, that story, let's call it a positive story, but, you just need to line up the negative stories on the other side of the ledger, and suddenly
totally.
that
But like,
becomes less
but
compelling.
But let's say, though, right, that every now and again, there's a person who is stuck. And I'm saying every now and again. How many times a year do you use an isopathic or a tautopathic prescription?
Isopathic 5, maybe, in my practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5,
5
maybe
times a
5
year.
times a year. Yeah, 5.
I would say once every other year. Sometimes it'll be a couple times in a year.
Tautopathic, I don't think, no, I can't.
But when it works, so tautopathic prescription is a remedy that's made from a prescription drug. It's rarely necessary, but I've had a couple of cases. In fact, I taught one just this week. I was teaching noble gases, intro to the noble gases, which, are my favorite group of remedies to think about. Just the idea of it is so interesting. Anyway, but I had a case of a woman who was doing really well on a particular remedy. And then she was a young gal at the time. Mom put her on a few different medications. She was on Accutane. They put her on an SSRI, I believe, and something else. Oh, and birth control pills. And case went off the rails. And, I tried the indicated remedy, like things were not sticking. And a dose of folliculinum did help.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
It's usually
So,
affiliate. That's the one.
yeah. So every now and again, so I would not say that it's like it never works. But what's happening now is that that's the first line of defense. So people are calling themselves homeopaths who are basically practicing isopathy without understanding that it's a completely different philosophical framework. And,
It's allopathy. I mean, it's allopathy using nosodes and homeopathically prepared remedies.
yeah, yeah,
It's extreme. It's an allopathic approach. Bizarrely, at the same time that good allopathy is identifying the misuse of that approach and moving towards us.
I know.
It's a funny old thing.
Yeah, it is. But like to that listener who wrote in, I mean, every now and again, yeah, like I said, even a broken clock is right twice a day. The point that we're trying to make here is that in the absence of good training in homeopathy, people are resorting to all kinds of ways to get around it. We had a Q&A for prospective students this morning, and a student said, well, I need to kind of become active on social media in order to build my practice. And I was just like, oh God, no. No, because if you're a good homeopath, if you really understand, you learn your craft, you're going to be busy because you get people better and they are going to tell all their friends. And you're going to have a busy practice. I mean, that's what happens with our graduates. And people who don't understand homeopathy, they have to resort to gimmicks or they have to become influencers in order to do their job. Or if they don't understand potency and posology, then they resort to home accord, throw all the potencies in. Why learn how to do it when you can just throw them all in or make something else up? Fibonacci home accord, that's a money-making scheme. So yeah, there are people who are definitely going to resort to isopathy or, having to prescribe a whole bunch of nosodes based on false premises. But I would like to read to you what Hahnemann would say about that, because there are people who are hell-bent and determined to say that homeopathy doesn't work, and they blame it on homeopathy. And
what does Hahnemann say about that?
Hahnemann says, I love this footnote so much. This is the footnote to Aphorism 148. And he's basically saying, I'm going to paraphrase the beginning because I don't want to read the whole thing, but he's saying, look, to find the remedy that the person needs, it is laborious and occasionally a very laborious pursuit. And there are definitely tools to help us get there, like repertories and materia medica. And it requires circumspection, right? You need to have good critical thinking skills. And, you need to learn how to do it. He says, the best reward for this is the awareness of a duty fulfilled. How could this laborious, painstaking work, which alone produces the best possible cure of diseases, suit those gentlemen of the new mongrel sect who vaunt the honorable title of homeopath and who, for show, give out medicines that are homeopathic in form and appearance? In other words, they give out the little white pills. Therefore, they call themselves a homeopath, but they only lay hold of in a perfunctory way. When the inexact means does not immediately help, in other words, when people who don't understand how to do homeopathy are not getting good results, they lay the blame for it on homeopathy instead of on their inexcusable indolence and fecklessness in dealing with the most important, most critical of human affairs. Here comes the best part.
Feckless and indolence is not the best part? Wow.
No, it gets better. It gets better. So in other words,
preach, sister.
Yes. What Hahnemann is saying here is like, there are people out there who haven't learned homeopathy, but they use the pills, and they use the pills in ways for which they were not developed, right? Yeah. Homeopathy, it's a thing. Yeah. There's a philosophy and there are the medicines. They're meant to be used together like this, like peanut butter and jelly. And if you separate them, then, the results are not going to be as consistent as when the philosophy is applied according to best practices. But may I proceed?
You may.
I love this one so much. They accuse homeopathy of being very imperfect, when in fact, the problem is that the most appropriate homeopathic remedy for each disease state does not spontaneously fly into their mouths like roasted pigeons without any effort on their part.
Roasted pigeons?
Yes, not just flying out of their mouths, into their mouths.
Why did he choose that? I'm intrigued about the choice of language there. Like he could have, because he's saying this isn't easy and it's like a roasted pigeon flying into your mouth. Right. He could have given a different analogy, but anyway.
Yes, but he says, being the adroit people they are, they know how to quickly console themselves about the inefficacy of their scarcely half homeopathic means by bringing to bear the allopathic toadies, which are more familiar to them. These cut a right stately figure. If the patient pulls through in spite of all this, these gentlemen then praise their venisections, leeches, etc., without which the patient would not have been preserved.
Love it.
I love this so much. So basically what Hahnemann is saying is, homeopathy, it's a thing. Learn how to do homeopathy. If you learn to do it, and it's hard, it's laborious. You have to work at it. You need to deploy your critical thinking.
Not for lovers of ease.
It is not for lovers of ease, right? At the altar of truth. In fact, that would be a really good follow-up. Let me just grab that quote, which is in I think it's the last paragraph from the first edition of the Organon introduction.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hang on.
I don't have a first edition here
Because I have it.
because you've got mine. You stole it.
I stole it. He says, I must warn the reader that indolence, love of ease, and obstinacy precluded effective service at the altar of truth, and only freedom from prejudice and untiring zeal qualify for the most sacred of all human occupations, the practice of the true system of medicine. The physician who enters on his work in the spirit becomes directly assimilated to the divine creator of the world, whose human creatures he helps to preserve and whose approval renders him thrice blessed. Ah, how amazing is that?
Yeah, it's nice, huh?
Isn't it?
Isn't it interesting that zeal is a great quality and obstinacy is not?
Mm,
Yeah.
yes.
Good stuff. All
I
right.
love that. Just a couple more things here, some more feedback. So,
Oh,
okay. So now that we've got these reels going on Facebook, right? And on Instagram that are excerpts from the podcast. So if you are listening to the podcast, you might not know that there's video that goes along with it. And so we've got it on YouTube, and I guess depending on what podcast player you're using, you can watch it on video. Anyway, so this is being used as as reels. And so
free.
Sherry, who does this for us, she posted the one where I talk about how homeopathy works, like my perspective of it. And so, of course, like the weirdest and most woo-woo thing that I say, right, is now going out as like a soundbite. And this is, if you listen to it, it's the part about where I talk about how there's sort of, if we are beings of energy, that we could visualize it as, like points of light, and that's part in harmony with the universe. I talk about the Schumann resonances and all this business. Anyway, so it goes out now into the universe, and people write back. And so this one person writes, I love this, lady, you're weird. What's the response to that? I totally get it. Because I think sometimes we as homeopaths, we forget that we have this whole language that we speak with one another, and it's like shorthand, right? So we'll say things like, energetic beings and points of light, or even we talk about syphilis, like it's no big deal. So I get yeah.
It reminds me just a cul-de-sac. Let's go down a cul-de-sac and then come back out.
Yeah.
But a guy from my Sydney days, I remember he did the whatever the ABC is, the Australian broadcast, the main radio channel that's in each city. He did the show from, I don't know, 4 o'clock till 6 or something. Richard Glover was his name, and he died. But he used to do this segment, which I loved and tried to listen to every day, which was where he would get people calling in from different professions, and they would just provide a sentence. And the point was, if listeners could guess what they did for a living. And it was, so people would call in and say, well, you get I don't know, I'm trying to think of a piece of heavy equipment that lifts a load of lumber and moves it, and something like that. And you got to guess what they do.
Right.
And I always thought that it'd be amazing to ring up and say, yeah, I had one today where a client with an underpinning of syphilis, with a predominant cancer anamnesis, presented with and I gave platinum or something, like, I don't know, just a statement like that, which would be kind of normal at a homeopathy conference, is
Sure.
like, and then is utterly bewildering and nonsensical to any other human being. But I would just personally, my response back to that lady that said, lady, you're weird. My response is, yeah, lady, you're not wrong.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I wear that mantle proudly. I'll tell you a funny story related to what you're talking about, and then we can wrap up with the finishing of the food thing.
Oh.
There was this place in New York, in Brooklyn. It was called Morbid Anatomy. It used to be a brick and mortar location that was like a medical oddity kind of. It's sort of like the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, except not a museum. Just
we costed to see if we'd get married there.
no, we weren't going to get married there. We were going to have my 50th birthday there. But it was like $12 million to rent the space, remember?
Yeah. I remember.
But and if you're interested now in sort of the end of life stuff and sort of the death conversation genre, they're doing really cool work, and they've got it's called Morbid Anatomy, and you can subscribe to their website. They do events and things, but they have lots of classes. It's actually, I found some really cool stuff for the development of our comfort care program. Really interesting. And it's, if I remember correctly, the women who founded it, it's these two sisters who married two guys from Depeche Mode, the band. And they started this business. Anyway, they used to have this brick and mortar location, and they used to have trivia night, and it was like weird medical trivia night. And I would kill it. I would take my friends there because it was like you would win drink tickets. And so I could like take everybody out on the town, because who knows more about syphilis and like weird chancres and 19th century medical conditions than a homeopath.
Right.
Like things like, it's the same thing like when I was doing my graduate work at Johns Hopkins, and we had this one class that people call the disease of the week class, and they go through all these like old disease categories, and like that one was so easy because it's things that we talk about, like chlorosis. I was like, oh, green sickness. Like, oh yeah, it was given to, it was a diagnosis given to young women who were, and people were like, where is this coming from? But it's because we still speak this language in homeopathy. Anyway, it's like totally fun.
Love it.
I really love all that.
Mm.
Anyway, okay, there was one story that where we started with our marriage counseling about the Masanon curry last night. And Al, we were going to tell a story of when you did cook for me when we were early in our relationship together.
Oh, yeah.
So-
when you were poorly,
I was really sick. So we
took to your sick bed.
yeah, we had been teaching, and this is when we were teaching in a physical location, and we had to come home. I feel like you had to drive. I was laying down. I felt really sick. Like my stomach was bad. I had kind of like vertigo. It was like, just like when you feel really bad. And so I got in the bed, and you were so nice. You brought me a tray.
Yeah, I bought you a nice tray of things that I thought would make you feel better and settle your stomach.
Okay, and so what was on the tray? Will you tell the people? What if we talk about obstacles to cure? What does it like? It wouldn't be funny, except that you are a healthcare provider in a holistic modality, and so
the first thing was a chunk of pate.
yeah,
nice French pate, and some cornichons.
which I love when I'm not about to throw up.
Then there was a stick of butter.
I have a stick of butter in a little bowl.
Yeah, and it wasn't a pack of butter. It was like I unpacked it and I put it in a bowl, for aesthetics.
Butter. Yeah.
And then my memory escapes me. What else was in that?
Some olives.
Olives.
And a glass of wine. So basically, I'm about to throw up, and you bring me an hors d'oeuvre platter and wine.
I think it might have been more for me than for you, by the sounds of it.
I'm thinking so. You put it on the bed, and there's like a tray with the legs, which is really nice to have. And you put it in front of me, and I was like, with the smell. The smell of pate when you're really feeling sick it's not the way to go. Anyway, that was funny. Yeah.
Sometimes you find yourself in life a little out of your depth. You're trying to do the right thing. Should I do this? Or maybe.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that was the best. All right, people. I think that's it. I think we've hit it.
All right, my good friends, you take care out there in the world, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Ciao. Bye.